people? It's DJ Face 860-561, Top Shelf TV, CT Freedom Films. Right now with Kenneth Eugene Spate, the author of Eyes on What Prize and Where's My Reparations. Right now we're going to find out in depth what this book is all about and what he means by these reparations and what is due to us right now. Pleasure to meet you here. Pleasure to have you aboard.
It's a pleasure to be aboard.
You know, a great book you put out, and right now I just want to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
One, you know, would you willing to discuss, you know, the circumstances that brought you to create a book of this manner, with this topic?
Yes, well, I had been in correspondence with a brother who was in Philadelphia, involved in the black community. He was involved in several movements, Fight for Lifers, a movement to trying to repeal the death penalty. There was a lot of black inmates on death row in the Philadelphia prison system, and several other black activist movements. And he was communicating with me about some of the discussions they would have in their meetings. And what I came to realize was that a lot of the issues that were coming up and that people were confused about what to do or how to respond to certain matters, you know, police review board, you know, education system and things like that, were issues that had already been resolved in terms of the correct outlook that we should have during our struggle back in the 60s and the 70s. But that a lot of what had been learned from trial and error and the experiences that we went through in the 70s, the 60s and the 70s had not been passed on to today's younger generation of community activists. There's been a gap, and the information available to most people who would even bother to look, you know, is deficient. It's not complete. So that really prompted me to start responding in letters. But the more in-depth it became, the more I realized that there were a lot of things that actually needed to be compiled and exposed to a broader audience than just those people in Philadelphia. So with that idea in mind, I began to write this book.
And with this, you know, most people, when they think of reparations, they think of the 40 acres and the mule. Now is this, you know, all about that, or just the contract? And then also within the book, you mentioned a contract between America and individuals. The 7 questions about reparations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
To answer your question, first of all, the reparations that I'm referencing on the front cover are not the 40 acres and the 2 mules and the sack of grain, rice, the plow, farm implements, and so forth, articulated in the so-called emancipation. In the first instance, the emancipation, that executive order by Lincoln, really only applied to slaves in the District of Columbia, and didn't have anything to do with the broader body of our population throughout the states. But more importantly, reparations is due not just for slavery. And I mentioned in the book that in reality, there have been several lawsuits on reparations filed. There were 4 major ones going on in the early part of this millennium. They were all consolidated in Chicago and dismissed on the grounds that people in our era, in our time frame, do not have standing to make a claim to collect on something that it's some injury that was done to people 200 years ago. And the thing about it is, not only that, because, you know, you could take it a step further as a matter of law and say, well, hey, my forebearer who was a slave, his labor is property. Your labor is your property, right? So his labor was his property, and you know, he wasn't compensated. So I need to collect as his heir, right? Which, you know, heir has right to collect the property of his predecessor. I should be able to collect, but see, the problem comes in is that, you know, the slave was property himself, so his labor was not his property. His labor was his owner's property. So you can't collect under that premise either. Now, to the contract. We are in a unique situation. Most people don't perceive themselves as slaves. Yeah, black people, average black person would say, well, I'm not a slave, I'm a black man in the White House. Yeah, but, you know, you're a slave under the law because you have volunteered to be so. And how did you do that, you say? Well, if you read the history of this country, you know, pay attention. One of the first things you would understand about our circumstance is that at the end of the Civil War and the so-called end of slavery, right? You know, that didn't, you know, that may have freed us, but it did not give us any rights under the law. So the Congress, so-called the United States, passed the 14th Amendment. Okay, the 14th Amendment was intended to, and this is what it says in the history books, this is also what it says in the law, to enfranchise the freed slave. And by this enfranchisement, you had now recognition under the law and you had rights. Now, let's put that in the context. Most black folks understand what a franchise is. If you got a McDonald's franchise, and you know, are you the free and clear owner of McDonald's, or are you a part of a corporation that sets rules and tells you what to do? Okay, so that should tell you something about the difference between being an enfranchised individual as opposed to being what the white Anglos who founded this, you know, they talk about the framers, George Washington, Jefferson, these guys who were plantation owners and big willies that created this thing. They were what were called, under the law, freedmen. They weren't a part of a franchise. You know, they each had the right to act and do whatever they felt. And you know, if I want to sit down with you and work in harmony with you, I can do that. And if I don't, I can get up and walk out the door and say, "Fuck you." That's it. I have that right. Why? Because the Declaration of Independence, they stipulated that they understood they had that right. So all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. You can't put a lien on my rights. My rights are free and clear, exclusively to me. So when you get a franchise, you don't have that. You know, franchisee of McDonald's can't turn around to McDonald's Corporation and say, "Man, fuck you, I'm charging $50 for my burgers and I don't give a fuck what you say." He doesn't have a franchise anymore. Matter of fact, he gets sued, he don't even have pants or drawers to wear anymore. He'd be lucky if they don't motherfucking put his ass in jail. This is the reality. So your franchise is very different. That's number one. Number two, about this 14th Amendment, it says in the 14th Amendment that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. So our citizenship only came to us as a result of being subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, the reason these words all have legal meanings, and I give a glossary in the book. It gives the legal definitions from the same law dictionaries they use in the Supreme Court. And these are the law dictionaries, these are the legal definitions you will find in U.S. law about these terms. Okay, you have to understand something about being subject. Legally, when you're a subject, that means that you owe. You know, you have an obligation. So, subject is very different from sovereign. And the law also stipulates, and the Supreme Court held, for example, in an early Supreme Court case, you know, Chisholm versus Georgia, that at the time of the Revolution here in America, the people became sovereign. You know, before that, the king was sovereign. All power is invested in him. The king could wake up tomorrow and say, everybody that I look at that I feel some kind of way about, take him out hanging. What did he say about that? Because he's sovereign. So that sovereignty ended. The sovereignty of the king ended, and the sovereignty of the people, a collective sovereignty, came into being. And the people created government, and they said government is our servant. Okay, this is government of, by, and for the people. I'm sure everybody's heard that expression. Government of, by, and for the people. So the government of the people means that we created it by the people, by our power, and for the people. It means works for us. So it's ours, my servant. You come in, you're my butler. Shine my shoes. You know, bring me my coffee, bring me my paper, give me my smoking jacket. Take the garbage out. You're my servant. Okay, so this is sovereignty. Okay, absolute power. Legal definition of sovereignty is the power to declare the law. Okay, it has two aspects. It has one character of sovereignty has to do with place, what place my sovereignty applies to, and the other has to do with things. What things do my sovereignty extend to? For instance, my sovereignty, the place of my sovereignty is this room. And what does it extend to? It extends to everything that I have within my grasp. So does it extend to what's in your hand? No. But you're in the room. Well, I can ask you to leave. You understand? So this is about sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is power. So subject, which is obligation, is not power. Okay? If you're subject to my rule, right, you don't have power. You do what I tell you to do. And this is what the subject citizen status of the 14th Amendment says. It says subject to the jurisdiction being the, being, like I said, this is where and what area and what things, right? So you are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, meaning you are subject to the where and the what as dictated by the United States. So you don't have no power over it. It's not of, by, or for you. You can't tell the government, hey, I think you need to come over and shine my boots. Hey, I think you need to hold my door when I walk through. Hey, help me put my coat on. Hey, fix the table and make my dinner. It's not yours. You don't have that power over it, okay? So that's one of the major things that changed with the 14th Amendment. It created a whole new category and status of citizenship and applied it expressly and explicitly to black folks. It applies now to everybody. How? By contract. What kind of contract, you say? Well, a number of contracts. Social Security card, driver's license, basically every document, tax return, everything that you sign your name to, your signature to, that has a little box where you check. It says, are you a U.S. citizen? And you check, yes. You have just confessed that you're subject to the jurisdiction. You've put yourself in that character and you sign that document. Now it is presumed to be a binding contract. Now this is a contract. That's a fraud. Because did you know that? Did you know that?
No.
Okay. See, and this is the whole thing, is that for a contract to be legally binding, it has to be fully disclosed. In other words, I can get you to be my slave if I have a contract that says right at the top, you will be my slave and you will wipe my ass every time I take a shit, and you will bow down on your knees so that I can step up on your back to climb in my bed, right? Do you agree to these terms? And then you sign your signature to it, and I sign my signature to it. Now we have a binding contract. You're obligated to fulfill those things because you just signed your signature saying that you would. Right. Okay? But I have a contract that says this is a contract between you and I, and I want you to do something. I'm not sure what, and I'm going to do something. I'm not sure what, but we'll just assume that whatever we do is okay. Right. You understand what I'm saying?
Very good.
Yeah. So we have these. In fact, I'm not even going to tell you it's a contract. I'm going to tell you it's an application. But an application for what? Well, it's an application for you to have a license. Well, what is a license?